So while they're rearranging the stage real quickly, and I do encourage each and every one of you to take advantage of connecting with all of these folks when you have time. And what Mary Kramer and the team have put together at Homecoming is nothing less than remarkable. It is a level of connection that I don't think I've seen anywhere else in the country. So please take advantage of that. And Mary, thank you again. This is amazing. Being your partner is always interesting. And with that are our next guests. So Jared Fletcher. Jared is wears a lot of hats and has worn a lot of hats. You guys can sit down. But VP of Government Affairs and Economic Development for Rocket Companies, but also gets involved in some of the Bedrock initiatives and all of that. And then I have an absolute fondness for Lily, Diego, and the Gensler family. Lily has helped us on the Downtown Detroit Partnership nonprofit side on a few different things, and continues to help us get smarter about the overall built environment. So thank you both for being here, and I'm going to grab this. And what I'm going to do, I guess I'm sitting in the middle of you two, so this is going to be kind of fun. I can look at both of you. But so Lily, why don't you go first and just tell a little bit about sort of the background, and then we'll get a little bit into the research that Gensler's doing on sort of where, especially the office market is headed.
Sounds great. Hello, everyone. Thanks for welcoming me. My name is Lily Diego. I'm in the Gensler Detroit office. I'm design director and North Central Region's practice area leader for office buildings, specifically looking at repositioning and landlord services, and as well as the workplace leader for consumer goods and emerging technology.
That was good. That was really good. Do you want to say anything about what you've been doing?
Yeah, well, it's great to be here. Great to see everybody, even though I can barely see you given the bright lights, but I trust you're there. I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs for Dan Gilbert's Rock family of companies. And Dan moved what was then Quicken Loans, now Rocket Mortgage, downtown in 2010. First with 1,500 workers, and then grew to now within Rocket Mortgage over 15,000 downtown to become downtown's largest employer. But from that, Dan really had a holistic vision for supporting Detroit's renaissance, and went from just rehabilitating buildings to house a growing company to developing residential, mixed use, investing in public space, really investing throughout the city. So as a substantial stakeholder in the city, this question of the future of office, as a landlord and as a company with 15,000 employees is something that we, think about every single day. And, as Dan's legacy, as much as he's a great entrepreneur, I think his legacy is the transformation of Detroit. So the way in which, these changing dynamics in the office market, bear on the future of Detroit is also something that we think about every single day, not just as an operating business, not just as a landlord, but as folks trying to carry out, Dan's mission and legacy.
Thank you, Jared. So, Lily, tell us a little bit about sort of what you're seeing globally, I guess, and then we can bring it back to Detroit.
Definitely. I think the topic here is trying to understand how do we bring people back to work? How do we revitalize our central business districts by bringing people back in? It's about trying to help people drive the commerce that's happening and revitalize the neighborhoods and communities that we're so interested about, which you will see that on your tour. Globally, we're seeing that in workplace, people are still wanting to come back to work. They want to be in person. Even though we see a reduction, about 37% reduction in collaboration, people want to be face-to-face. It is the very specific, thoughtful aspect of creating destination for work. And when we look at office buildings and workplace, we're trying to understand how do you integrate amenities and work. So it is becoming a lifestyle center. They're becoming experience centers. It's no longer just about the single source office building, but it's about the lifestyle that surrounds and supports the way we work, as well as play, and then how we live. So if we can try to create balance in that ecosystem between office, building, community, district, neighborhood, then we'll see the that remote and hybrid work is not something that we should be afraid of. It's still going to help drive the economic, support of what workplace looks like for our central business.
Yeah, so it's really interesting because, for the Downtown Detroit Partnership, and we actually have our fall stakeholder meeting, which is focused on development, mostly in the core, but, in and around downtown Detroit coming up, in another few days here in September. And a lot of what we do is we track some of the data, and I know both of you are doing that as well. We are about 45% of the daytime work population back in the office on any kind of consistent basis. Thanks to rocket companies in Bedrock, there's a push to get people back in on a more consistent basis. But that has a direct implication to not only our economy. We have obviously an employment tax in the city of Detroit. During the pandemic, we had a $50 million roughly deficit in terms of tax deficit based on people working from home. But on the flip side, we're seeing some really unique uses of these spaces as people have realized they maybe can work differently. I think about what Deloitte just did in terms of moving into WeWork space in 1001. But we also have seen the importance of the visitors, conferences like this, bringing people to the city. So, Jared, where do you see? You're spending time on legislation in Washington. You're spending time here locally in trying to figure out what Hudson's is going to look like in an entirely different environment than the first time you broke ground. What are you guys thinking about?
Well, I want to give a thoughtful answer to that question, but a large part of my mind is, I think I should have sat in that chair.
You should have.
I think I should have probably sat in that
it's
chair.
Okay.
Okay. But now that I'm here, we're just going to go forward.
We both like looking like you.
All right. So what Eric is alluding to is, we were one of the instigating forces behind something called the Revitalizing Downtowns Act, introduced by Senator Stabenow and Congressman Gomez out of Los Angeles and Larson out of Connecticut, Hartford, Connecticut, to support the conversion of obsolete office buildings, particularly your older, Class B and Class C buildings, to residential. Actually, while one could take the view that it's languishing in the United States Congress, things do take a long time to percolate through the system in Congress, and actually more and more major national interest groups are coalescing behind this legislation. It solves a lot of issues. Vacancy has tax implications for cities. It has public safety implications. On the other hand, if you just look at the latest inflation report, housing costs are driving inflation. We have a major housing supply issue in this country, and if we have this, win-win in dealing with vacancy and converting it to housing, it certainly seems a win-win. But I want to back up for 1 second and just kind of talk about this problem at its, or this, I don't want to say problem, but this, opportunity. There you go. That's why my man, thank you. At its fundamentals. So I guess I do want to ask, so this is not a Detroit opportunity or issue. This is, across the country. How many folks here are in from San Francisco? Just by a show of hands. Okay, we got some. How about New York City? Okay, we got a lot of New York City. How about Chicago? Okay. And forgive, I'm sure there's many other wonderful, wonderful places, but in New York City, the front page of the New York Times today was how the jobs recovery in New York City is lagging the rest of the country. Banner headline in the New York Times, because office workers aren't back and the whole ecosystem they support is not back. The national data on physical presence in offices, the national average is about 43.8%. So Detroit is pretty much right there. San Francisco is in the low to mid 30s. In terms of physical presence back in offices. Texas is kind of leading the way at, in the 60s. So a lot of cities are facing this issue of, how to change in a changing world. I actually sincerely believe Detroit has real opportunities in this space for 2 reasons. Number one, we were not overbuilt on office. So we don't have, enormous oceans of vacancy. That's number one. Number two is, before the pandemic, and I'll stop in just a moment, I promise. Before the pandemic, we had 70,000 office workers in our downtown every day in our central business district, 70,000 and 6,200 residents. we were wildly imbalanced. However, our residential lease rate is 99%, whatever it is, in the 90s, very, very high. There's an enormous demand to live in the urban core. Young folks, empty nesters in particular, and we have an opportunity to lean into that, and by doing that, accomplish something very fundamental for our city too, which is growing our city and growing our city's tax base. So bottom line, the opportunity in Detroit is you got live, work, play. Work is transitioning with probably the persistence of hybrid work. It's about live and play, and we're very well positioned to do both in downtown Detroit.
So Lily, I'm really excited because through our support, and Jarrett was front and center with this initiative, but the state decided that they were going to take some of the ARPA dollars, they were going to run it through the MEDC, and they were going to do this RAP program, which was revitalizing placemaking. So we picked 8 different projects in the core of the downtown with our partners to say, what could we do if we were so benefited by being selected and got this grant of dollars. It's matching funds, so we still got to come up with some money. What could we do that would really start to transition the built environment in the new future that we're looking at? Because as Jarrett says, it's going to be very different. We're already seeing it very different. So from a Gensler perspective, and again, I'm unbelievably proud of Gensler's research, where does Detroit stand? Where is the opportunity for Detroit? Why should this group continue to come back and invest in Detroit?
Sure. Gensler loves doing research, obviously. We're a data-driven firm.
We like doing design, too.
We love doing design, but our designs are always based on data and what we can understand in comparison. So for example, we've been doing the City Pulse now for a handful of years, and we've done cross-sections across cities, and Detroit has been introduced into that City Pulse this year, and it's running on par. So the high trends that we're recognizing in terms of what is specifically happening to Detroit and compared to New York, Chicago, San Francisco, and others is almost identical when it comes to how do we look at the bringing people back in the city center. What is driving the destination impact? And it's all about flexibility and opportunity and diversity of choice. So diversity of choice, if we're looking at it, even housing, like you were touching on a little bit, but even if we look at housing, everyone's a little bit concerned of office to resi conversion. Are we overinflating the opportunities that we have in terms of hotel boutiques and keyed units? Not necessarily. We're down by a third. So if you are able to uplift that type of property here, we're bringing people in, we're giving diversity of choice, and we're allowing for commerce and retail to then infill and support that life aspect of the play and work. So we're looking at assets then of, I'm a huge proponent of repositioning, reimagining, existing infrastructure. So looking at assets that can be adaptively reused. So when we start looking at the office to resi conversion for Class B and C offices that might not now have strong leasing capabilities, they're prime for these keyed units because it has legacy, it has story, it has the details of architecture that a lot of times people want to see in a more tactile way. They want to be immersed in it through the experience. That gives rise to the opportunity to build Class A. And in Detroit right now, we are looking for new Class A buildings and we all learned this through the pandemic, technology is coming, and it's coming fierce and strong. So even though we were part of it before, the pandemic really caused us to understand it as part of our lifestyle. It is now part of our communication. It's the way that we're going to continue to function. So how do we start looking in terms of integrating that into our built environment again,
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting. I mean, and both of you have a really strong perspective. But, in terms of, again, the partnership tracks a lot of the data. We had 33 million visitors pre-pandemic on an annual basis. We dropped to about 22 million visitors. This is non-office, non-residential population coming into the core of the city. We're now on target in 2022 to be well in excess of 35 million visitors. A lot of that has to do with the environment that we're creating in order to attract people to come into the city, to enjoy the city, to shop in the city, to stay in the city. But we also got to continue to figure out how to build that product that they want to live in and what they want to work in. And it's kind of interesting. CBRE just made a $100 million investment in a technology firm that is going to be focused on how they can utilize their office space, their obviously clients' portfolio of office space in a much more flexible, creative way. Bedrock, the largest landlord in the city of Detroit, I gotta believe is thinking about that. The deal that you cut with Deloitte was a perfect example where WeWork was not gonna fill their space in the traditional way.
Yep.
This has now become an enterprise approach for Deloitte across their platform around the world. And that came out of a Bedrock portfolio.
I mean, I don't think there should be, really, if you think about it, any surprise about the persistence of hybrid work or that, the office environment needs to change for a new era. The data you're referencing, restaurants are full, bars are full, sports stadiums, if teams are competitive, or Tiger,
Lions almost won.
Lions almost won. It was a sellout.
Yeah,
it was a
yeah,
sellout.
it
So
was hard knocks.
it'll be full for now, So I want to go eat, I want to drink, I want to be merry, but I don't necessarily want to go into work. I mean, this should not be like, a shock to people that's the social dynamic playing out. And frankly, if you think about the power of technology, it's a little bit antiquated, the notion that I've got to be, physically in a room with somebody 9 to 5 every day to communicate with them. So the persistence of hybrid work, I think people talk about as macroeconomic conditions change, as employers get more leverage in a different labor market, is it going to change? I think it's obviously the pendulum's going to swing probably a little bit, more towards re-equilibration of normalcy, but hybrid work is going to be here and flexible work is going to be here because it just makes sense and it's what people want. So what does that mean for the office market? What does it mean for cities? For cities, again, let's say, I'm in the office 3 days a week. That's a 40% drop in demand for cities if I'm not there Monday and Friday, right? So cities have to adapt, and that's why this live-play strategy is so important. On the other hand, you may need the exact same amount of office space before if everybody's in the office Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, because everybody's there for the overlapping days, the day of peak demand. So I think it's more nuanced for offices. I think my bottom lines will be, you are going to have a reduction aggregate in demand for office space. You're going to see it particularly in the Class B and Class C older buildings, which are the least enticing to bring people into the office, the least set up for collaboration and coordination. As luck would have it, as Lily pointed out, those are the best footprints for conversion to residential. And then in terms of where office demand is, it's going to be in your modern, technology-enabled, collaboration-driven design. And Bedrock is very, very focused on that. The office space in the Hudson site is built all around that. We brought in a great chief information officer whose whole world is focused on how can we, build the high-tech office of the 21st century for this kind of collaboration, for the new way of doing things. Again, for Detroit, it's opportunity to grow our residential population, opportunity to do some targeted conversions, and as we build new office space, opportunity as we didn't build back in the day so much, we're building now, and it's a perfect time to build for the future.
So Lily, from a Gensler perspective, looking at markets throughout the world, two questions. One, is this the new norm? Is this the way it's going to stay, or does this sort of play itself out and people ultimately come back to the market? You talked about the collaboration and innovation that takes place when you're together. So how long are we in this, or is it forever? And then the other is why do you think Detroit might be unique in this scenario, and what are the things that Detroit might have a leg up on?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we're in the state of evolution. Out of challenge comes opportunity and innovation. And I think Detroit has been one of those cities who are powerful in that resilience. It has always been able to innovate and be vanguard when placed in this type of a pressure cooker. What we're seeing in the pandemic or even post-pandemic right now, I don't think is anything that will shock us to stay and evolve. Like I was saying before, technology or collaboration, blurring industries, blurring building type, looking back on the 20-minute neighborhood, a diverse equity in terms of assets and resources, that happened pre-pandemic. So the pandemic kind of just pushed us to figure out how to be quicker out with it, to make it more experiential so that we're really focusing back on people who drive the decisions towards land value. So I think in terms of that, it's just an evolution that seems to turn the dial fast. Globally, this is still, it's happening globally. It's scalable in composition, but it's always driving towards that flexibility and diversity of choice. So when we're looking at future-proofing, even when it comes to policy and we're looking at ESG practices in all of our buildings that are either adaptive reuse, repositioned, or newly built, we're trying to future-proof towards things we know are coming. When we start looking at even things like restrooms and circulation, the traditional concepts of, male-female or the 5-foot corridor, these are all being reconsidered because we are transitioning as a collective, as a human collective, for more equitable and diverse types of opportunities or just types of environments. Industry is doing the same thing. So we look at what was traditionally maybe automotive that is becoming technology. We're blurring the lines between what certain practice areas are and being a lot more integrative in it. So we are understanding that even workplace is no longer just office. It is amenitized. So the trend that we're seeing even globally is, and you touched on it, that square footage might not necessarily drop because even though you might not be in office, when you are in office, you're choosing to work differently. So the desk footprint is smaller than a collaborative footprint, especially when you integrate digital technology. When you're starting to become globally communicated, you need platforms that allow for a little bit more square footage because the infrastructure to communicate local to global is a little bit larger.
That's great, Libby. Well, again, this is another one of these conversations that we could have a lot more discussion around, and I appreciate you guys sticking with us. I want to be sensitive to the time frame and the fact that we've got a tour right after this. Jared and Lily, thank you again for this. A couple real quick takeaways. Obviously Detroit hasn't figured it all out, but there are a number of things that you've heard over the last, Mary, 8 or 9 years? 9 years, okay. This is the 9th year. So over the last 8 years, you've heard a lot of things about Detroit and what we've done to improve our overall environment. Our public leadership is as strong as it's ever been, and that continues to be a real benefit. Our public and philanthropic, or our private and philanthropic leadership is equally as strong and committed. We've cleared our legacy costs. There are a number of things that the city of Detroit has done right, and the downtown core have been an example for. And so as you move around over the next couple days, please make sure you're taking advantage of not only talking to these two, but also so many of the others that are actually making things happen and figure out how to do it here in Detroit. But thank you, Mary, again. Thank you, Colleen. This has been great, and we will see you on the buses.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Joe Benvenuto, Vice President of Lift Build, and I'm here to transition you from the presentation to some very exciting tours. But I want to talk about one specific project on the tour and a little bit of emerging technology that we have today happening in Detroit as we speak. Lift Build is a member of the Bart Mallow family of companies, and Lift Build is a very deliberate attempt to try and double our efficiency as a construction company and address two major problems: labor shortage in the marketplace of construction, but also this project on Exchange, which is the residential factor that we heard a lot about today. So Lift Build is a methodology in which we try and turn the construction site into a manufacturing environment. What better city to do that in than Detroit? We try and create what we refer to as a factory floor. That factory floor, then all of the assemblies happen at grade, at ground level. That's safer and more productive for our tradesmen and women. And then lift that floor plate up into place in a percentage that's about 90% complete before it reaches its final height. The project you will see today is we have hung the 12th floor. It's a 16-story residential building. The top 2 floors are condos for sale, with the remaining apartments for rent. And on the ground floor, there are commercial space and back-of-house amenities and such. You will see there today that we have a floor plate at grade that demonstrates the technology. We have the 12th floor hung, and that floor that you will see today will get hung next week. So very exciting to be here. I appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to seeing all of you down at the site to answer more questions. So thank you all.
Thank you, Joe. That was just a little tease. Tomorrow you're gonna see the project, but not everybody is here for the real estate forum. So we're gonna have another presentation with video tomorrow. But the buses are out here. We're going to be going to Michigan Central, which we've seen. If you were here in 2017, you remember having dinner inside the vacant Michigan Central station. Now Ford Motor Company is transforming it and restoring it. We're going to see a Great Water Opportunity Capital Project in Midtown. We're going to see the Exchange building that Joe just described. We're going to drive by a couple of the bedrock projects that were mentioned, including the Hudson's Tower and the Book Tower on Washington Boulevard. So our goal is to have you back here by 3:45, 4 o'clock, and then dinner here. The reception is at 5. We have a very short program at 5:30, and we're going to have dinner outside because the weather is gorgeous. And being outside, we have an opportunity for a couple of very cool things that are surprises, but we will be unveiling those this afternoon and later this afternoon and this evening. So see you on the bus. Thank you.